Why yes, I do have a blue jacket as well. You noticed. I have a cookie. Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today, I'm talking about the new album from The Black Dog, Loud Ambient. Alright, one more quick video on The Black Dog. This seems to keep happening. I keep thinking I'm out of new things to say about this long-running Sheffield techno and ambient trio, and they keep finding just barely enough of a way to give me a new angle to talk about them in full video form anyway. With this being the 7th studio album they've released just within the past 3 years, and a lot of their work sticking to some semi-predictable formulas, it started to get pretty difficult to keep up with covering everything they do, and the last couple of videos I did on them, I said out loud that I was planning to start, relegating their work to some stuff I missed roundups going forward. Not because I enjoyed what I was hearing any less, obviously having already done 10 dedicated videos on their albums over the course of this channel's existence. I think it's clear I'm still as in-depth a fan of them as I always have been. Links to the playlist of all my previous videos on them can be found in the description. But I was definitely getting to a point where both their volume of output was getting difficult to keep up with, and I wasn't feeling like I would have enough to say or break down that I haven't said plenty of times already on other works of theirs. I started feeling like I was pushing it when they put out Other Like Me last year, a solidly enjoyable album that stuck to all their usual techno and ambient formulas I would have expected, without any special twists or any moments I considered among their absolute best. They then took that as a license to change up their sound for their next album, Sleep Deprivation, and go for an entirely ambient sound that was more focused on emotional melodies than nearly anything they'd released up to that point, even if the experience was pretty long-winded and front-loaded, I feel like. I didn't love the album, probably could have summed up my thoughts in a short segment if I wanted, but it was just interesting enough of a move for them to cover in a video, and the best moments on there were in fact really pretty. And earlier this year, they put out My Brutal Life 2, which I ended up covering purely because it was a sequel to My Brutal Life, which is my easy personal favorite of the albums they've come out with in this most prolific recent era of theirs. Even if that sequel didn't entirely live up to my somewhat higher expectations for it, it was another generally solid collection of ambient compositions in a similar vein, if not one that really stuck with me or that I felt compelled to keep around. That probably would have been the most fitting point to start relegating them to shorter segments, but whatever. Now, to be clear, I was fully ready to be sticking this album in my next roundup, since when you look at what it's doing on paper, it doesn't sound like it's going to be anything too far afield of their usual fare. When I see the title Loud Ambient, I might think of some noisier drone pieces like the kind that artists such as Tim Hecker or Finnis might put out. Though, this is not that. It's instead their return to more of a danceable beat-driven sound, going back to techno after spending roughly a year entirely within ambient territory. Which, I mean, a year doesn't seem like a lot, but they were putting out a ton of work in that year, and not just those 2 studio albums, but also doing semi-regular, Sleep Deprivation live streams, as well as an entire My Brutal Life Ambient Mixes box set, 3 entire CDs worth of alternate versions of cuts from those 2 albums, and stray B-sides in the same sonic territory. It was apparently getting to a point where maybe some people who haven't been following them for years were starting to think that ambient music is all they do, which inspired them to just make some techno again. Once they got back into the process of it, one of them made a one-off joke about the techno stuff being, oh, that's a loud ambient track, as a mild piss take of those fans who think that's all they do now, and the name just stuck. Oh yeah, and the entire project was also directly inspired by the paintings of Mark Rothko. According to them, that guy's use of color fields, blending, mood, and scale directly informed the tone of their work here. In fact, it even looks like they were originally thinking of calling this album Rothko and putting it in the same series as My Brutal Life before deciding it worked better as its own standalone thing unrelated to that series. So yeah, the backstory to this project sounds like any number of other Black Dog albums. It sounds like this is just going to be another thing in their usual techno style, I guess. The reason I ended up deciding to make a video on this one anyway is because the actual resulting album is really dang good and one of my easy favorites they've put out in a minute. Just in case this really does end up being the point at which I stop having time to keep up with making full videos on all their albums, like I keep thinking and saying I will. The playlist of my reviews will now be ending on a more genuinely positive note instead of the subtle anticlimax that cutting off the playlist playlist that My Brutal Life 2 would have been. Loud Ambient is not exactly the most deep or unique experience they've delivered. In fact, the 10 tracks on this album do all kind of sound pretty similar, and my descriptions of each one aren't going to be too different from each other. But there is a certain energy to this album in particular that I'm not really used to feeling out of new Black Dog albums. Building directly off the previously, almost uncharacteristically hopeful direction an album like Sleep Deprivation set for them, and reinterpreting that tone into more melodic techno compositions results in quite possibly the single most feel-good listen this group has had maybe ever, at least since the days when the Plaid guys were on board. Now, that's obviously not saying much, given the especially dark, brooding, and moody tone has been directly part of the appeal of everything this group has released over the past 20 years or so. But Loud Ambient is maybe the happiest a Black Dog album has ever felt. This is probably the closest one could ever get to, the Black Dog making a trance album or something. It really caught me off guard, in the best way. And even better, unlike Sleep Deprivation, which kind of undermined itself with its structuring or lack thereof, Loud Ambient is super tight and to the point. With only 10 tracks and no interludes or sidetracks, there's no room for filler here. And they just stick to that one focus and give you 10 tracks in the same style that all happen to hit, and none of which are skips or drop the pacing. The album's opener and lead single, They Came For My Head, is a pretty indicative look of what the album's all about. Lots of shuffling beat work going up next to very pretty layers of uplifting synth arpeggios and woodwind-like pads in the background. It's recognizable as the same Black Dog you've always known, but the mood is just so much more comforting and, again, uplifting than anything I'm used to out of them. The other 9 tracks are kind of iterations of the same general blend of sonic ingredients with varying shades of lightness and darkness. I Will Cleanse You gets a bit more mysterious with its melodies and more propulsive with its stuttered bass line. Several Rituals I Can't Explain sounds like a production that would have come right out of the 90s Warp Artificial Intelligence series, with classic 909 drum machines and some possibly dub techno-y plucks, and the album moves into a darker space with Working Class Sabbath being mostly cascading bass synths, being covered in tons of reverb, and adding up to an equally propulsive techno groove. Double Drop Nightmares is less nightmarish than its title implies, but it does live up to the drop part with all its plinky little synth melodies that feel like water droplets, I suppose. Though if you want a darker version of a similar blend, there's the track Reality Comes Crashing Back In. This track reminds me of my favorite moments from their Neither Neither album back in 2015. The mood is very dark and hazy, and the bass kinda swallows the mix a bit like Clouds of Fog, but the lead melodies are able to provide some light in that darkness. Though in between those tracks there's You Should Stay There, which delivers one of the most well-layered mixes of wavy synth chords, warm round bass, and even some twinkling bell textures around the corners. I guess this is probably the track on the album that best evokes the Mark Rothko inspiration for me, in how it feels like fields of colored paint harmonizing with each other. I guess it's hard to explain, but this was the track where I guess the music best matched the imagery they settled on for me. Moving on from there, Checking, Counting, and Repeating has another shockingly major key and uplifting set of melodies and a particularly breezy set of round techno bass and house beat work. Another one of my big favorites there. Penultimate track, Rumination Romance, shows them leaning further into their IDM roots with a set of percussion textures that feels much more tactile and well layered, though still quite delicate and atmospheric. And then finally, the album closes with Pamphlet, which is admittedly my personal least favorite melody on the album. It feels a little like some kind of victory theme from a video game, though A, that's still very much not the kind of thing I would expect to be saying about a Black Dog production, and B, it still hits well on the triumphant note it's going for and feels like the most fitting pick for a finisher they could have gone with. So yeah, that's everything on Loud Ambient. This album's really good. Now, I'm not entirely sure if it crosses over into properly great territory. If this had come out at the end of last year, yeah, it might have gotten an 8 from me, because that year was kind of dry. But this year has been so stacked with great electronic music that the competition got way stiffer. Also, you're obviously not going to hear anything on this album that you wouldn't have heard loads of times in this genre before. If this came from anyone other than the Black Dog, I probably wouldn't have blinked at the material on display here. If this exact same album came out of an artist I'd never heard of, signed to Anjuna Deep, I would have been impressed. Might have even given it a shout out into some stuff I missed roundup. Probably wouldn't have done this video on it, though. This is still on that border where I could have easily shoved this into the next roundup, and I wouldn't be surprised if I do finally start doing that with their albums going forward, though. Obviously, I said the exact same thing the last 2 times, so I guess you never know. Even if I'm not sure if I love this album, it's right there on that border of greatness and much closer to the quality level of My Brutal Life 1 than My Brutal Life 2. I think this is my second favorite to come out of this recent creative outpouring they've had over the past 3 years, behind the former of those two. I am the kind of guy who typically prefers albums with a little more meat and variety on their bones than this, and my favorite Black Dog albums feel like they go even deeper and flesh themselves out even more than this. But I absolutely cannot fault this one for the sheer tightness. This is an album that gets in and gets out with no skips and no wasted time. I enjoy all 10 tracks roughly equally, and it's held up really well with repeat listens too. If you couldn't tell from the fact that I got this video up on the exact same day the album released, they did send me an advance copy, so I have had this one sitting with me for a few weeks already. So yeah, Loud Ambient is just a really solid album. Whether or not I end up continuing to make full review videos for Black Dog albums remains to be seen. Maybe this will be it for now, purely out of my not having enough time to keep up with all of it, or maybe they'll just really surprise me yet again with the next one. I don't know. But in either case, you'll definitely want to check this one out if you're an ambient techno fan. And I'm feeling a very strong 7.7 to a light solid 8 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters, they're awesome people. You want to add yourself that list, link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.